Sorry, I'm running a few minutes late. It's been a busy morning, and I'm so grateful to see you here. It's just wonderful that you are here. Thank you for being here and for being here on this week right before the Passover. No, because of the light. We are not going to be able to see anything if we. So, welcome to those people who are watching us from home. Again, my apologies to you too for running a few minutes late. Do we have Hebrew Bibles? Do we have Bibles with us? Yeah? Good. I have quite a bit of material to cover with you today. I'm going to ask, do you mind if we come up a little bit? Do you mind? That's okay. Don't worry about it. It's easier for me because I always want you closer. Okay, I always want you. That's so. My microphone is on. Yes, my mic is on. Great. So in any event, but I'd like to start, and I'd like to really speak with you today about the scroll of Esther in context, and also in the context of, if you like, Passover. Start from where we ended last time and really talk about the scroll of Esther in a way that I think is likely different from the way we've mostly learned it. We started with that last week, and we're going to continue with it this week. And I'd like us to really think about this yet again as a political document, but a unique political document. In other words, a biblical political drama. Okay? I'd like to think about Esther as a biblical political drama. Let's think about this. Let's start from a review, and then let's continue on and see how we're doing as we move forward, and really talk about this and try to get through this in the time that we have. Let's just review for a second, okay? And let's talk about where we are in terms of this text of the Esther scroll. We talked about it being a late composition and a late inclusion in the Hebrew Bible. We talked about this being a moment, a composition that really occurs, if you like, in the 4th to the late 4th, early 4th, late 3rd century before the Common Era. So that's when it's composed, and it's composed in both Hebrew and in Greek. It's a unique biblical text. No other text is composed in this way. There's a Greek version and a Hebrew version at the same time. And we talked about this, and the place of Esther in the canon, and the place of Esther among the scrolls. Then we talked about its inclusion in the Hebrew Bible, and the debate among the rabbis about the appropriateness of it being included or not being included, right? We talked about some of this stuff and how it happens and what's going on there, right? We talked about the uniqueness of Esther in the sense that God is not mentioned in it, and it's not centered in the land of Israel. In fact, there's no mention of the land of Israel in the scroll of Esther, right? And we spoke about that too. And we spoke about the outstanding redaction, the perfect redaction of the Esther story. In fact, the Esther story is the story that most resembles a Greek tragedy in terms of its redaction. It's really perfect. Beginning, middle, climax, and really extraordinary, just perfectly constructed. And we started introducing the character of Ahasuerus. And we started talking about Ahasuerus and Ahasuerus' anger, and the implications of Ahasuerus' anger. Remember, we started talking about this. And this is how we're going to continue. We're going to now continue with the notion of anger, but moving away from anger, the implications of anger and other emotions to this drama. Now, I'm going to say something that I think you may find surprising. No other biblical text, there is no other scroll, there is no other book that includes as much emotion as the scroll of Esther. Emotion of any kind. Other texts in the Hebrew Bible generate emotion. I read Isaiah, I read the Psalms, I read other books, and I am filled, let alone Job, and I'm filled with emotion. But specific reference to emotion, naming emotions, there are no other biblical texts that contain as many references to emotion as the scroll of Esther in what really is a very brief text. And there's a reason for that, and it's interesting, and there are implications to it. And we want to talk about that. And we want to talk about that in a way that links today Purim and Passover, and in a way that allows us to really move forward. Let's talk about this for a moment. Let's think this through for a second. Okay. We're back to Esther chapter 3, right? This is where we started. For those of you who have the books, let me know what page we're on so that we can figure out. 1460, page 1460, okay? And we are in Esther chapter 3, right? And we're going to go back from Esther chapter 3 for a moment, and we're going to talk about this. Let's see what is happening here between Mordechai and Haman, right? Let's start with that, okay? Take a look at what's going on here. Now, again, we're going to read this like adults. This is not the pediatric reading of the scroll of Esther. The king's courtiers in the palace gate knelt and bowed low to Haman, for such was the king's order concerning him. In other words, it says in the Hebrew Bible, Achashverosh made an order. Achashverosh made an executive decision. Right? An executive order was published saying that people needed to bow down to Haman. Right? It actually says that. Mordechai would not kneel or bow. And the king's courtiers said to Mordechai, and it says, Yom Vayom. The Hebrew says in chapter 3, Yom Vayom. Every day they said to him, and what do they say to him? Why do you not bow down to Haman? Why do you disrespect Haman? Is that what they say to him? No. What do they say to him? Why do you break the law? Why do you not follow the king's executive order? What are you doing not following the rules? Right? It's the king's order. It's a law. Why are you breaking the law? Why do you disobey the king's order? It says that in the Hebrew text. Yes? Okay. When they spoke to him day after day, again, Yom Vayom, he would not listen to them. They told Haman, in order to see whether Mordechai's resolve would prevail, because what did he say to them, to the king's courtiers, when they reached out to him and spoke to him about this? What did he say? It's because I'm Jewish. Brilliant. It's brilliant. It's very smart, right? Because I am Jewish. For I am a Jew. Right? So they say this to Haman, and then they're going to test him. Now, look at what's going on here. First of all, this is repeated action. Right? It's not just an oversight of one time. It's repeated action. Yes? Number two, he's warned. He's told about it. Mordechai is asked, what are you doing? And he's not just asked once, he's asked daily. Yom Vayom. Then they're putting him to the test. Right? In other words, there's a procedure here. This isn't just something that happened. Is this how you learned the scroll of Esther? Did you guys know this? It's all in the text. Right? It's all in the text. Right? And in the meantime, he explains he breaks the law, he disobeys the king because he's Jewish. Okay? Yes.
Were there no other Jews in the city that we never hear about anybody else in this?
Thank you. I really thank you for asking the question. I'll repeat the question so that people at home can hear it. Were there no other Jews? Were there no other Jews? There were many other Jews, but there were no other Jewish courtiers who were close to the palace. He was the Jewish lobbyist. He was the paradigmatic court Jew. Right? Right? And who doesn't bow down? Mordechai. Right? Why? Oh, I'm Jewish. Okay? Okay. That he's a Jew. And so we continue, and Mordechai would not kneel or bow low to him, so it's tested out. Haman comes out, confronts him. Mordechai would not bow down, would not kneel, would disobey the king's order, and Haman was filled with rage. Nimla chema, was filled with rage, goes the Hebrew. Right? Now, this is not the beginning of the process. This is an ending of a process. We observe that Mordechai doesn't bow down and kneel. People speak with him. There's an explanation. He's being tested. Right? I mean, right? This is not just... And Haman now is confronted with this. It's to his face. And Haman is filled with anger. What happens here as a consequence, as an implication of the anger? How do we understand the implication of this anger? What do we do here? Right? The implication of the anger is that Haman now does not want to just punish Mordechai alone, but rather he decides to punish, to do away with all the Jews, Mordechai's people. Mordechai's people. What does the anger here lead to? It leads to collective punishment. The anger is, oh, you are this, I'm going to punish this. I'm not just going to punish you, I'm going to punish what you are. I'm going to punish everybody. This is collective punishment, right? This is the implication of anger right here, right? All the people are now going to be punished throughout the kingdom of Achashverosh. Do you see what happened here? Am I making any sense? Yeah, go ahead, Deborah.
Yeah, but it's not random, because if he's saying the fact that he's Jewish is what's preventing him from following the law, it's not exactly random that then they say.
It's not random, Deborah. Thank you for saying that. Deborah is saying it's not random because Mordechai said he was a Jew, and that was the reason he wouldn't bow down before Haman. In other words, it's not random. You're absolutely right. It's not random, right? Haman here is not completely irrational, right? He's hearing from Mordechai, I'm not going to bow down because I'm a Jew, right? He says, I'm going to do with you guys. Goodbye. You guys are not going to follow the king's order, the king's edict. Goodbye. Right? And here, the way it's presented, it's not just about Haman. It's not just about his dignity. Right? It's about the king's edict. It's about the king's order. It's about following the law of the land. We have an indication of this and of how significant this is in another passage. Let me take you back. Let me show you this. Remember the implications of anger. Okay? Now we're going to go to chapter 1. Go back to chapter 1 in the scroll of Esther. What page are we on here in terms of chapter 1? Where are we? 1457. 7, thank you. Page 1457. Remember, there is this big set of feasts. Vashti is holding her reception for the women. Achashverosh is holding his reception for the men. There are these huge feasts, receptions, and all the rest of it. Achashverosh is at the top of the world, feeling wonderful, and, imbibed with drink, and calls Vashti to come wearing her crown. By implication, we gather that he wanted her to wear the crown and nothing else. But, coming in wearing the crown, right, is what the text says, right? And Vashti refused to come at the king's command conveyed by the eunuchs, right? And the king was greatly incensed, and his fury, hamato ba'ara bo, it says in the Hebrew. His fury burnt within him, raged within him. Right? Now, what are the policy implications of that act, of that refusal, and of that fury? What are the implications? The implications are Memuchan, the advisor to Achashverosh, the advisor to the king, coming up with the idea that the queen's behavior will make all wives now degrade their husbands. All wives will now treat their husbands with contempt. Right? Now, all women are going to be like this. Yes? Why? Because the example of Vashti, Achashverosh said come, she didn't come, right? The example is, you don't have to listen. You don't have to obey. Right? What are the implications? Right? This is now going to happen throughout the kingdom. In other words, look at what is going on here, right? Yes, Vashti is going to be deposed. Yes, Vashti is going to be removed. Yes, all of that is going to happen. But what else is going to happen? What else is going to go on here? On top of that, right? Because all women, all wives, all married women are now going to behave this way, because this is what we now have, the utterance of Ahasuerus, your majesty, throughout the realm, vast though it is, should be that all wives will treat their husbands with respect, high and low alike, and the proposal was approved by the king. In other words, what have we done here? We've taken an instance. Mordechai not bowing down to Haman. Vashti not coming over to the palace. What have we done here? In the context of anger, of a rage, of a fury that burns within us, we have created a policy that generalizes from this act of an individual to an entire population. Yes? Do you see it? Yes? I know we haven't learned the scroll of Esther in this way. I know we haven't spoken about it in this way. We normally don't read it as adults. But this is why we're here, right? This is what we want to cover. This is the kind of work we want to do, right? So this is where right now we are. This is what's going on at this time. Yes? And it's remarkable, and I want you to know it's remarkable because the author of the scroll, the redactor of the scroll, expects us to see this. In other words, Haman here does not act in a way that is unprecedented. The king, 2 chapters before, acted in the same way. Out of anger, generalized to all women. Haman, out of anger, now generalizes to all the Jews. Right? It's not unprecedented. There's a formula here, and for those of us who read the scroll, we see the formula. Yes? So you see anger, and you see the implications of anger, and the political implications of anger. The political implications, in other words, it leads to a policy change. It leads to a policy pronouncement. Yes? No. Yes, Deborah.
The only thing I would say is that while all Jews may not bow down to idols, not all women have this mindset. But I understand what your point is how we respond to anger.
So Deborah, thank you. I'm going to again reiterate your question so that people at home can hear it too. There is a difference between the actions of Mordechai being explained by him being a Jew and the actions of Vashti as a woman that may have to do with Vashti's state of mind, with what she understands to be Achashverosh's state of mind, and that doesn't necessarily reflect upon all women. In other words, she here is not, unlike Mordechai, who claims to be acting on behalf of and as a representative of all Jews. Vashti here, according to the text, doesn't seem to act as a representative of all married women, of all wives. And you're pointing out that difference. Deborah, you are right. But what do the advisors of Achashverosh say? She did not act in a way that represented all married women, but now she's going to become their role model. She's the queen. She's the first lady. And as the first lady has acted, now others will act in the same way, right? It may not have been the intention, but, right, this is the reasoning here. Yeah? She's an example. She's a role model, Dennis. It's no different than women's rights. Heaven forfend. Perish the thought. Right? It's no, right? I mean, this is, yeah? Right? This is what we're, right? Okay. Yes. Very good. So this is where we are. And I want you to see that anger here in the scroll of Esther has implications. And it has political implications. It has legal implications. Okay? Do we? Yeah? Okay? Let's continue and let's just continue. Yes, go ahead, Marie.
I just wonder, are we supposed to be concluding something about the nature of anger or the nature of the king?
So the question is, are we supposed to be thinking about the nature of anger through this text or the king's character? So, first of all, we are supposed to be thinking about everything. We're supposed to be thinking about the king, and we're supposed to be thinking about anger. But in the second instance, the anger is Haman's anger, not the king's. Okay? So there's anger here that is beyond. Now, you know what? You're asking a really wonderful question. Are we supposed to be thinking about the king's anger or about the anger in general, or about anger as a feeling? You know what? We're going to take a detour. I'm going to answer the question, and we're going to take a detour. What time is it? How long? Oh boy. We're going to take a very brief detour. Go to the book of Numbers, chapter 11. Go to the book of Numbers, chapter 11. Okay? What page are we on? 224. Start from verse 3. Can anyone read from verse 3?
That place was named Taberah, because a fire of the Lord had broken out against them.
Right. The fire of the Lord broke out against the children of Israel. Now carry on.
The riffraff in their midst felt a gluttonous craving. And then the Israelites wept and said, "If only we had meat to eat. We remember the fish that we used to eat free in Egypt, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. Now our gullets are shriveled. There is nothing at all, nothing but this manna to look to."
Nothing but the manna to look to. I once went on holiday to Cape Cod, and I visited the colonial prison in Cape Cod, and which is a wonderful place to visit. And there is a log there that includes the diaries and the comments of the prisoners, right? And the one complaint from the 17th century, the 1600s, the late 1600s, about the prison was about the diet. All they ate was lobster. Here all we have is manna. They couldn't take lobster anymore. We read this and we started laughing. It was really extraordinary, right? But they were, the poor prisoners were being fed lobster. right? Okay, so let's continue, right?
Now the manna was like coriander seed, and in color it was like bdellium. The people would go about and gather it, grind it between millstones, or pound it in a mortar, boil it in a pot, and make it into cakes. It tasted like rich cream. When the dew fell on the camp at night, the manna would fall upon it.
Right, so the manna was bland, is what we're saying. It was fatty and bland, and it felt like cream, right? And people were crying because it was bland. And in Egypt, we had meat and onion and garlic and a variety of things. And here, what do we have? Potatoes. Where all we eat is manna, right? Right. That's all we're eating now. Are we getting sustained? Are we eating? Do we have food? We do, right? Page 225. Do we, right? We're eating, but everybody's complaining. We want to eat real food, right? Okay, let's carry on.
Moses heard the people weeping, every clan apart, each person at the entrance of his tent.
Okay, so everyone is crying. Everyone is weeping, emotion, right? Weeping, yes. Now,
the Lord was very angry.
the Lord was very angry. God was very angry. God was very angry. I'm so glad I remembered which chapter it was. God was very angry, yes. Yeah.
And Moses was distressed.
And Moses, okay, so, right? Vayichar af Adonai, God, the Lord was very angry, it says. And it was ra, it was bad in be'einei Moshe. It was bad in the eyes of Moses, right? Moses was distressed. God was angry. Now what happens?
And Moses said to the Lord, "Why have you dealt ill with your servant? And why have I not enjoyed your favor? That you have laid the burden of all this people upon me. Did I conceive all this people? Did I bear them? That you should say to me, carry them in your bosom, as a nurse carries an infant, to the land that you have promised on oath to their fathers. Where am I to get meat to give to all this people? When they whine before me and say, give us meat to eat. I cannot carry all this people by myself, for it is too much for me. If you would deal thus with me, kill me rather, I beg you, and let me see no more of my wretchedness."
Or of my failing, right? In Hebrew, it's of my failing, right? Now, I want you to notice, by the way, the gender flip. Did I conceive this people? Did I bear this people? Who conceives and who bears? Right? Carry them in my bosom. Who carries children in their, right? I want you to see that there's a gender game that's being played here in the language, in the context of which Moses speaks to God. Again, this is a detour. I didn't plan on this, and we're taking time. But Moses is now saying, did I give birth to this people? What, I invented this people? God, wait a minute. This is yours. You're the parent of these people. What do you want from me, right? You're asking me to do this. You think I'm failing? Remove me. Take me away. Don't let me wallow here in my own failings, right? And then?
Then the Lord said to Moses, "Gather for me 70 of Israel's elders, of whom you have experience as elders and officers of the people, and bring them to the tent of meeting, and let them take their place there with you. I will come down and speak with you there, and I will draw upon the Spirit that is on you and put it upon them."
Okay, there is a policy change. Something now happens. God gets angry. Moses is distressed. Emotion leads to a policy change. What is the policy change? It's no longer going to be Moses leading the people on his own. Moses is now going to have 70 elders who are going to lead the people with him. right? And these 70 elders are going to share in Moses' authority and in Moses' connection with God. In fact, Eldad and Medad are among them. You know, you can read a little bit further. People go out into the encampment and start prophesying. And Joshua says to Moses, there's people prophesying. It's not, you know, they're going to take your place. Imprison them. Do something. Right? And Moses said, would that all the children of Israel were prophets. Right? Yes? But I want you to see something. Emotion here, anger, and God's anger has led to a policy change, a constitutional change. Here in the book of Numbers, in chapter 11. Right? In other words, are we looking just at the king, or are we looking at the character of anger and the political, legal, constitutional implications of anger? Right? Do you see what I'm saying? There is something here that goes beyond just King Ahasuerus. Right? And remember that we started out with Haman. Right? Good. Okay? So we're seeing what's going on here. Yeah? Ready to carry on? Yeah, can we continue? Okay. So you see this happening, and you see that Haman's reaction is not completely irrational or unprecedented. In other words, it fits into a mold. It fits into, right? It fits into a pattern, into something that we can recognize. Okay. Okay. What does Haman do? Like the women, like Memuchan, who spoke about married women, who spoke about the wives, Haman says there's a certain people scattered and dispersed whose laws are different and who will not obey your laws. Right? Is this completely irrational? No. Is this completely wrong? Yeah, from Haman's perspective, thank you, Mel. Yes, from Haman's perspective, it is wrong. But is he wrong in perceiving this? Right? This is the information he received. Mordechai wouldn't bow down to him because he's Jewish. You know, I don't want to start, you know, raising all kinds of difficult issues about role models and paradigms and so on and so forth. But the text here indicates to us the danger in pinpointing Judaism as the cause or as some of what's going on here. I mean, there is a critique here in the text, right? This is the reaction of Haman. This is where Haman goes. Now, again, this becomes the policy implication, right, of the anger of Haman. Yes? And, you know, everything comes out, and the edict of the king, and the runners, and the steeds, and all the rest of it, it all comes out. Let's continue, right? We shouldn't tolerate them. Let's move to other emotions. Other emotions. Chapter 3, verse 15, the end of chapter 3, and then 4:1 and 4:3, chapters 4:1 and 4:3. What page are we on? Does anyone know? What page? 1461. Let's take a look at 1461. The decree was proclaimed in the fortress of Shushan. The king and Haman sat down to feast, and the city of Shushan was dumbfounded, was confused. The Hebrew word is nevocha. Nevocha, perplexed. In other words, people didn't know what to do. Okay, you know what? I don't know if... Yeah, let's do it. Exodus chapter 14. Exodus chapter 14. Exodus chapter 14, in the context of the Exodus, Not right at the beginning of the chapter, but a couple of verses down, maybe verse 3 or verse 4. Let's go to Exodus chapter 14. What page are we on? 105, page 105. Exodus chapter 14. Yes, 14. Chapter 14. The children of Israel have left Egypt. They're now in the desert, right? And what does it say?
3. Verse 3.
Verse 3.
Pharaoh will say of the Israelites, they are astray in the land. The wilderness has closed in on them. Then I will stiffen Pharaoh's heart, and he will pursue them, that I may gain glory through Pharaoh and all his hosts.
The children of Israel are astray in the desert. What is the word that is being used for astray in the desert? The same word that is used here for Shushan, nevocha, nevochim. They are perplexed in the desert. What does it mean that they're perplexed in the desert? That the desert has closed in on them, and on the other side is the sea. They're locked. They don't know where to go. They don't know what to do anymore. They don't have a sense of direction. Right? In other words, the notion of perplexity, the notion of confusion, this notion of being stuck, of being dumbfounded, is a notion of being unable to discern what is the appropriate next action. Right? That's what we're talking about here. That is the perplexity that we're talking about. That is what confusion is. You don't know where to go next. Right? So here comes yet another feeling. And look at what happens among the Jews. This happens in Shushan in general. And what happens among the Jews? Further down, this is verse 3 of chapter 4. There's great mourning among the Jews, fasting, weeping, and wailing. Now we are in sadness. We are in mourning. We're in grieving. Okay? We've moved from anger to perplexity, to confusion, to anger, to sadness, to mourning, to grieving. Right? Yes, do you see? You see what happened here? Right? The Jews have moved to a sense of complete loss, a sense of grieving, a sense of defeat. Right? The city of Shushan is perplexed. People they don't know what to do. They don't know what to say. Right? Which, by the way, think about what's happening in our world today. Think about people who are living under the control of tyrants and how difficult, and you don't know what to do. You can't demonstrate because you're being taken away and no one ever sees you again. You can't come out. People don't know what to do. There's confusion.
But this has been going rather long.
Helga, this has been going right all along. This is why we read this. Right? There is something here that we recognize. Right? Absolutely. 100%. 100%. And now there is sadness and mourning and fasting and weeping and wailing. There's grieving. We are now in grieving. Yes, Dennis. History repeats itself. History repeats itself, yes. The leader has given his hand to this. The leader is perplexed, but the leader has allowed this to happen. The leader has allowed this to happen, right? Okay, let's continue. Let's continue. Letters were dispatched and all the rest of it, right? Then go back to chapter 8. Go to chapter 8. Where are we in chapter 8? What page?
1465.
1465. Go to page 1465. The first set of letters were dispatched. First letters were sent, saying all the Jews can be killed and so on and so forth. Second set of letters were sent, saying the Jews may defend themselves, right? This is now chapter 8, after the downfall of Haman, right? Remember? Now we are at the end of the story. And, right, the city of Shushan, from confusion, what happens here? Rang with joyous cries. Ve'ha'ir Shushan tzahala v'samecha, it says in the Hebrew. Right? Was rejoicing and happy. Right? You see what happened here in the way the city of Shushan, the way the story is framed. The city of Shushan was perplexed, like the perplexity of the children of Israel in the desert, right? In the same kind of way, where are we going to go? We're stuck. We are landlocked, and there's the sea, and we don't know what to do. And we're in the midst of a desert, right? Where do we go from here? That kind of feeling. And here, to the city of Shushan, ringing with joy and with celebration at the letters that are being sent out, right? It gets a little bit more complicated. A little bit more complicated. We are now at the conclusion of the story, and fear and grief and sadness and mourning have given rise to joy, right? And there's joy. And now we're moving. You see what happens here in the context of the scroll of Esther. The feelings are identified. They're named in a way that they aren't in other biblical texts. It's quite, they're telling us what people are feeling. You see what's going on here. But I want to take us through this process because it's actually so important. There's such an important message and point to this that I want to really get to. Okay? In every province, in every city, what happens with the Jews? Where this command's decree arrives, there's gladness and joy among the Jews, feast and holiday. In other words, there is such a relief. We can defend ourselves. We can fight our way. We can fight our enemies. We can stand up for ourselves. There is relief. There is joy. Feasting, holiday. Yes? Yes? Now we can organize. We can do this. Yes? We have moved from grieving to joy. Yes? Does that? Yes? Good. Now let's think about what happens underground. Because the scroll of Esther references that too for us. Let's go a little bit further. Yet again, let's talk about, the sadness, the grieving, and the joy are things that we learned about in school. We know about that. There are other things we didn't quite learn about that are related. Let's go there. Let's talk about these other things because they're in the text, right? And many people, look at this. We are again in chapter 8, verse 17, and we're going to move to chapter 9, verses 2 and 3. We're toward the end of chapter 8 and then the beginning of chapter 9. Many of the people of the land professed to be Jews. They became Jews. They moved towards Judaism. Mityahadim are identifying as Judeans, are moving towards becoming Judeans for the fear of the Jews. Pahad haYehudim nafal aleihem. The fear of the Jews fell upon them. Now we are from joy to fear. Now there's something, now we're getting somewhere. Fear. Okay? Remember, we're going to take this back all the way, right? There's fear of the Jews. And the fear of the Jews is causing others to identify with Jews and to want to be with the Jews, lest they be attacked by the Jews, right? They want to be identified either as allies or as Jews or somehow associated with Judaism themselves because of fear, right? And it says, Mityahadim, they're identifying as Judeans. It's not Jews, it's Judeans, right? And all the governors, all the officials, all the king's stewards show deference to the Jews for the fear of Mordechai. Pachad Mordechai. The same word, fear. Pachad. Pachad Mordechai. The fear of Mordechai. Right? And now we go to the Psalms. And now we go to the Psalms because in the Psalms, in Psalm 105, what page are we on?
1232.
1232. Is it Psalm 105? Yes, it is Psalm 105, I think. Yeah. Why? I have a moment of doubt here. I think it's Psalm 105, but look at what is happening here in the context of the Psalm. This is the Passover story. Right? Recognize the Passover story? Yes? Jacob, this is, I told you, we're going to look at the relationship with Passover. Here is the relationship with Passover. The children of Israel, Jacob sojourned in the land of Ham. God made the people very fruitful, more numerous than their foes, right? Oivehem, their foes, in the Psalm text. God changed their hearts to hate God's people, right? The Egyptians are now changing their hearts to hate God's people because they're so numerous, because they've overpowered them, right? Plot against God's servants. God sends God's servant Moses and Aaron, whom God had chosen, perform God's signs among them, God's wonders against the land of Ham. God sent darkness. They did not defy God's words? The Egyptians defied God's word, right? And God turned their waters into blood, killed their fish, land teemed with frogs. Does this sound familiar? Does anyone remember this story? Yeah, this is the Seder in the Psalm, right? That's right, the 10 plagues. Yeah, right? With the wine? Yes, exactly right. Swarms of insects, God's command, lice through their country, hail for rain, flaming fire in their land. Locusts came. It's all here. How do I know all of this? I read the Psalms. Right? And it's also in Exodus. But it's here in the Psalms. We have it right here in the Psalms, yes? But what do we not have in Exodus that we have in the Psalms? What's the connection? Why are we reading the Psalms rather than reading God struck down, excuse me, this is a typo, God struck down every firstborn in their land, the first fruit of their womb, the first fruit of their vigor, right? God led Israel out with silver and gold, none among their tribes faltered. Egypt rejoiced when they left. The Egyptians were happy to pay them, to give them their stuff when they left. Why? For fear. Again, the same word, the fear of Israel had fallen upon them. Right? Now, the redemption of Purim is the same as the redemption of Passover. In the sense, the two redemptions are parallel redemptions. In what sense? That the equation of fear has been transformed. A moment ago, who was afraid to be killed? The Jews, the Judeans in Persia, right? Now, whom has fear fallen over? All the others, right? Including the officials, including the courtiers, including everybody else, right? What happened here at the time of the Exodus? For a moment here, who was afraid? No, the Jews had been enslaved. The Hebrews, right, had been enslaved. They were afraid. Now what happened in the plagues? What happened? The equation turned, right? And now who is experiencing fear? The Egyptians. And the Egyptians are happy for all of these people to now leave, right? In other words, now there is a political statement that's being made here. Remember, we're talking about a biblical political drama. This is politics. It's about politics. What do we need in order to be safe? We need to be feared. We need to be feared. We need to be respected. We need to be seen to have power. This is about power. Politics at the end is about power. And the other side of that coin of power is fear of power. Right? What we have here is political positivism in its biblical expression. Right? Yes, Helga.
But it seems to me that throughout history then, we have power and then we lose power and then we're told we shouldn't even think that way.
So throughout history, Helga says correctly, we have power, we lose power, we are told not to even think in terms of power. You know, there is a dynamic in history wherein these things change. What does the scroll of Esther tell us? Mind the power dynamic. Mind the power relation. Be careful. Watch out. The loss of power and the loss of other people's fear of you has implications, right? What we have here is realpolitik, a kind of positivist political approach in the biblical text, in a way that we may not find entirely comfortable. But it's here. And we read it, we see it. It's here. Right? But there's more. There's more. I told you we're going to bring this back. Right? There's more. We're going to Isaiah chapter 19. Who can find Isaiah chapter 19? What page number are we at? Isaiah chapter 19 is Isaiah's prophecy with regard to Egypt and the war that Egypt leads against Assyria. And I'm sorry? 654, page 654 in our books. And Isaiah predicts and prophesies the fall of Egypt, the defeat of Egypt. Now, Isaiah's prophecy is a little bit premature. It doesn't quite occur in this way in reality, but it certainly is not an Egyptian victory the way the Egyptians hope for it to be. But take a look at what is happening here. I want you to see this because this is going to help us wrap everything up. Utter fools are the nobles of Tanis, the sages of Pharaoh's advisors have made absurd predictions. I see. The most intelligent of Pharaoh's advisors have made absurd predictions. How can you say to Pharaoh, I'm a sign of sages, a sign of Kedemite kings? Where are your sages? Let them tell you, let them discover what God has planned against Egypt. The nobles of Tanis have been fools, the nobles of Memphis deluded. Egypt has been led astray by the chiefs of their tribes. Again, confusion. Confusion. There's a lack of understanding, lack of knowledge, confusion, and error. Right? There's an error here. God has mixed with her a spirit of distortion and will lead Egypt astray in all her undertakings as a vomiting drunkard goes astray. Now take a look at this. Egyptians shall be like women, trembling and fearful on the day of their defeat. They will be like women. This is Isaiah. It's not me. It's Isaiah. Egyptians will be like women, trembling and fearful because the Lord of hosts will raise his hand. And here I left the gendered language intact because we need to see this in the way it's written. We need to understand the gendered message here. In other words, not only what is the message that this text sends to us, the land of Judah will also be the dread of the Egyptians, they shall fear whenever again the language of fear, the same Hebrew word, pachad, occurs here too. Not only is there defeat and fear that are associated with each other, but more. Who is fear associated with? Fear and trembling is associated with what? Women. In other words, what we are reading in the book of Esther, what we are reading in the Psalms, what we are reading in Isaiah, is not only about a political drama. It is a political drama and it is a gender drama. What happens when you are afraid as opposed to what happens when other people are afraid of you, and how you can identify yourself in gendered ways. Remember Moses? Numbers chapter 11? Remember Moses? Did I carry this people? Did I conceive this people? Moses at a moment of vulnerability. Moses at a moment of distress. Moses identifies himself in what terms? In feminine terms, in terms that have to do with motherhood, right? In terms that have to do with caring, with responsibility, with that kind of fragility and vulnerability, having to deal with all of these people around him, right? What happens here? Defeat and loss and fear and trembling are associated with the feminine gender. Right? The political drama of the scroll of Esther is also a gender drama. How does the scroll of Esther start? With Queen Vashti refusing King Ahasuerus's order. And what does Memuchan, the advisor of the king Ahasuerus, say? All married women are going to now disregard their husbands, disrespect their husbands, bear contempt for their husbands. Therefore, what are we going to do? Reestablish male sovereignty in every marital household from great to small, right? Yes? What is this about? Right? It is about power. It is about a power dynamic and about a particular gendered patriarchal structure to our society, which is associated with our view of the body politic. Our view of the body politic in Persia, our view of the body politic with regard to Egypt, our view of ourselves. Now, friends, this may not be who we are today. This may not be what we subscribe to. This may not be what we believe in. We may, and I hope some of us do, find this offensive and troubling. But this is where we come from. This is our legacy. Right? It may not be who we are, but it is where we come from. And we must recognize it. We must speak about it. We must teach about it. It's not just about politics and power. It is also about gender definition, and gender identity. There is that too. And at the same time, there is political wisdom and observation here in the scroll of Esther. We continue to read the scroll of Esther. Not only do we continue to read the scroll of Esther, we continue to celebrate it and teach it to our children. I want, if I may, because for shortage of time, goodness me, I really am short of time. We only have just a couple of minutes left, and I've already kept you past 12. But let me take this a little bit further. And let me do this, but everyone understands do you see what I see in the text and what I'm trying to describe here in the text? Yes? We've gone from anger through the implications, the political implications and constitutional implications of anger, through perplexity, through grief, through joy, and through fear. Right? You remember the kind of roller coaster we've gone through here in this session, and the connection between the redemption of Purim and the redemption of Passover through the Psalms, right? You see where we've come to and the way we understand all of this. Now, let's for a moment go back to our story. Let's for a moment go back to Purim. Can you see this? Oh, this is very difficult to see. Can you see this? Can you see this painting? Can you make this out? Oh, I'm sorry. This is a painting. Actually, I think it's 16th century. I'm sorry. This is Artemisia Gentileschi. She is a woman, Italian painter, who lived in the 16th century. Did she? 17th century. 17th century? This is 17th century. That's right, 1654. Yeah. This is a painting that's at the Met. I was going to bring to you this painting last week and start off with this, and I want to bring to you this painting now. It's very difficult to see. Look it up. This is Esther before Achashverosh. It's from the Met in New York. It's a phenomenal painting, painted by a woman, one of those rare paintings, classical, amazing, large paintings, painted by Renaissance paintings, painted by a woman, wherein Esther is in front of Achashverosh. And you can't see this here, and I wish you could, and I don't know whether, James, you can focus on this, and maybe for the people on the screen who are seeing this at home, they can perhaps see this more clearly. Esther is fainting. The king is sitting elevated on his throne. Achashverosh is sitting elevated and listening. And Esther, who is held up here, is fainting. Right? And I want you to think about this image for a moment. And the image of fear and the image of panic and the image of lack of control, as opposed to who is in control, who is collected, who is seated on the throne, right? Who is in power and who is out of power, right? And how do we understand that power dynamic, that power relationship, right? Can you see this? Do you see what's going on here? Yes? Do you see how this is represented in the text? What is the feminine representation here in this piece of art, right? The feminine Esther is the power of Esther, is her powerlessness, is the sympathy that she generates on the part of King Ahasuerus, because she's powerless, because she's fainting, because she's out of control. Yes? In other words, where is what is going on here? What is happening here in this painting? This extraordinary painting, right? We are falling into this. We are capitalizing on this gendered identity and gendered identity in as far as the power dynamic is represented in it. Do you see this? I mean, I find it absolutely fascinating. I find it really quite extraordinary. You see this here? Yes? And I encourage you to look this up. It's online. You can look this up. Go home and look this up. It's a magnificent painting, right? But then I want to share with you yet another painting that's in the Cleveland Museum of Art. Okay? I want you to think about yet another painting. And I want to offer it by way of contrast. This is yet another painting. I don't know if we can see this. We can't see this. Oh, I'm so sorry. Can we turn the lights off here? Is there a way to... Let me see here. Can we, Dennis, can you see if we can turn the lights off completely here for a moment? Oh, wonderful. A little bit better. A little bit better. A little bit better. You obviously can't see this. I'm so sorry that you can't see this, that it's not clear. But take a look at this. This is from the Cleveland Museum of Art. This is Jan Steen, who is a Dutch artist, again 17th century. in this painting, look this up or go to the Cleveland Museum of Art. I wish I could be now at the Cleveland Museum of Art and speak to you about this painting. The light on the painting is on Queen Esther. Queen Esther is the person in red and blue here on the side. She is the person speaking. On the other side of the table is a Haman who is completely distraught and falling off his chair. And next to Haman, above Haman, in a figure that you can't see, is a completely drunk Achashverosh. A completely drunk Achashverosh. Now, who is in power? Who's in control in this painting? Where is the light shining onto this painting, right? Onto Esther, right? And who is completely at a loss of power? Achashverosh and Haman, the men. The woman here, Esther, the queen, is in power. She's in control. She's the one speaking. She's the one making an argument. She is the one defeating everyone around her. The only woman there, right? With women looking around. There, you can't see this, but behind her are women. There are women looking around. She is the person who uses persuasion and reason in the face of these men who are hopeless. They look like the worst of my troubles. They look awful, right? One of them is falling off the chair. The other is drunk. It looks like he doesn't even know where he is. It's a striking image. It's a striking painting. And what's the point of the painting? To alter our sense of the power dynamic from what we had read in the text of the story of Esther, wherein women are powerless. And by the way, what does Esther do at the end of the scroll of Esther? What does she do with all the power that she has? She hands it over to Mordechai. She hands the ring to Mordechai, and the house of Haman goes to Mordechai, and Mordechai becomes the second in command to the king. And Mordechai goes out in regalia and so on and so forth, right? In other words, who in the text of the scroll of Esther becomes the leader and the holder of power? A man, Mordechai, right? And Esther now takes a back seat, right? Why? Why? Helga, why? Because this is the world. Because this is the world Esther lived in. This is the world that in many ways we still live in. This is a text of patriarchy. And what we have in this extraordinary painting in the Cleveland Museum of Art, and I hope one day we get to see it, and to stand together there and to see it and read the text, is an inversion of the power relationship between Esther the woman and the men around her. Yes? So I want you to see this. I want us to understand this. I want us to understand how deep and complicated and involved the text of the scroll of Esther is, and what I tried to communicate with you today in this session is that the words that are used in the scroll of Esther that describe emotions, anger, perplexity, grief, joy, fear, have political implications. They have implications in the world, and that all of them are associated not only with our body politic, not only with the way we see ourselves within society, but also with our perception of gender here in the text of the scroll of Esther. Of the place of men and the place of women, let alone the other gender issues that we're dealing with at this time, right? And for us to maybe have an opportunity, for us to maybe have an opportunity to think about the redemption of Purim and the redemption of Passover a little bit differently. Because the redemption of Purim and the redemption of Passover maybe are not just about the redemption of the Jews. Maybe the redemptions of Purim and the redemption of Passover, maybe these two redemptions, and the redemption that we're going to be celebrating this weekend on Friday and Saturday in our Sidorim, maybe this redemption is the redemption of the powerless to power, of those who are discriminated against into a state wherein they are no longer discriminated against. And maybe we can break away from that paradigm wherein the weak and the fearful and the trembling are gendered in a deeply uncomfortable way. And maybe we can break away from that dynamic and redeem ourselves not only to a state wherein we are empowered at the expense of others who become disempowered and therefore see ourselves in a different way within a society, including in a different gendered way. Maybe we can break away and be redeemed from that mold of that equation of power and powerlessness. And perhaps that is what true redemption ought to be about. And whether we can achieve it in our world is a big question, but maybe that is what we should strive for. This kind of redemption is what we should strive for, right? And so as we come to Passover, I just wanted to share this with you. So thank you for bearing with me.